My name is Jonathan Holloway, and I am honored to have been selected as the 21st president of Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey.
I think we're all set.
You should all have
right?
it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
good.
Thank you so much. So I guess without further ado, we should begin. First of all, President Holloway, I know I was going to make that mistake, and I did.
I'm a professor.
We just wanted to say that's true. You are also a professor. For the purposes of this interview, though, we're going to address you as president. We just wanted to say thank you so much for talking to us today. This is a great honor. It's wonderful to be talking to you. We're very excited. So throughout the next 30 minutes, we're going to kind of get to know each other. And all of us are here actually English majors, so we're all very invested in storytelling. And the purpose of today's interview is to get to know your story. And while we do that, we also thought it would be productive if you got to know a little bit about us as well, our names, some of our interests, so that we can kind of have a more natural discussion. So my name is Beza. I'm an English major, like I said. I'm also a junior, and my favorite spot on campus is Voorhees Mall. I love it during all of the seasons, but especially during the spring. It's really interesting because we all act like we've never seen warm weather before, and everyone's just sprawled out on the lawns. It's really so lovely. And we were robbed of that last semester, so I'm really, really hoping that we get that in the future. So yeah, without further ado, Scott.
Yes, my name is Scott Reamer. I'm what you might call a super senior at the Evolve campus, and I've been practicing as a professional artist for most of my life.
Hi, my name is Abby. I'm also a creative writing minor, and I have to agree with Beza that Voorhees Mall is definitely my favorite place to be during the spring because it's just so beautiful. Everything's coming alive again, especially our campus.
Yeah, hello, my name is Lindsay. I'm a senior. I'm obviously an English major. I also have a major in Spanish and a minor in creative writing. My favorite place on campus is Cook Douglas. If you haven't made it over to Cook Douglas, I know that you're new to Rutgers. I urge you to get there soon, especially in the fall around Passion Puddle. It's just breathtaking and real serene. And also, I want to say, I think we have a long lost connection, kind of. My mother's best friend, Leanna Kuntz, the sister of Lynn.
You're kidding me.
Yeah. She told me that she had Thanksgiving with you once.
Wow, I never would have seen that coming. That's amazing. Yes.
So yeah, I just wanted to put that out there that Leanna's one of my favorite people in my life. So that you guys met each other once and knew each other briefly.
Yeah.
Very exciting for me.
That's wild.
So yeah, we wanted to begin by asking you a few questions about your childhood. Firstly, in an epigraph in the introduction of your book, Jim Crow Wisdom, you used a quote of your father's, Jonathan doesn't know his own family history. Can you tell us a little bit about why you chose to use that quote and what it means to you?
Sure. I mean, so to understand the context for that quote, you need to back up a bit and I need to explain the book to you. So the very short version of that book is that I set out to write a standard third-person omniscient history. And I write about this in the introduction, the more I got into I was stuck. I couldn't make headway in the book. Sort of a classic writer's block, conceptual block. And then once I started to give myself permission to tell stories from the first person, interwoven as I did in the book, certain stories just came out. And that moment popped into my head as here I am as a professional historian trying to tell a history of a phenomenon, finding my own history in, leaning on my own memories without verification on purpose, as part of this sort of larger conceptual exercise. And then that vignette, that moment popped into my head. I'm like, oh my God, the extent to which I found it fascinating that Jonathan doesn't know his own history from a father who didn't want to talk about history. So how am I supposed to know it? And it just became this interesting sort of tautology about the notion of memory and identity. And it just, I don't know, I found it quite compelling as a little tiny thought piece that sounds compelling in a certain way when you start the book, but when you go back through the book and go back to it, you're like, wait a second, there's a lot more going on in that little bit of that little tiny phrase.
Right. Thank you so much. That was a wonderful answer. And I also want to ask, do you have any favorite and least favorite memories from your childhood? And more specifically, do you have any personal experiences that you believe led you to where you are today to decide to go into to further education and to become a professor?
My childhood was delightfully boring. I mean, and I mean that in the best way. I mean, if I had traumatic experiences from my childhood, they were of the nature of, you know, life is full of lots of little traumas. I mean, there was no, I mean, it really, and I say that with great affection, it was a delightfully boring childhood. You know, you guys were raised in a different era, but, you know, for people in my generation, the phrase is sort of like, you know, we had a bike, just be home before the street lights come on. So during the summertime, we were just gone, just doing whatever stuff I would never let my kids do today in terms of being out of our sight or out of reach. So it was really lovely in that way. In terms of, so is there a best memory or a worst memory? I just had a nice childhood. I mean, I really don't, I don't know how to answer that question with specificity. Now, as far as, put it this way, I could craft a story about how my mother's love for history transposed itself upon me, and that set me on the path to becoming a college professor. But that would be a fiction. I mean, the fact that my mother did love history, she did take me on these field trips. There are things that I loved about American history, but I never, throughout my childhood, becoming a historian never was once an idea. In the college, there's a longer story, but the very short version of I knew I was going to be an orthopedic sports surgeon. That lasted 6 weeks before calculus reminded me that I really didn't like math or science. It reminded me very clearly. Then I was going to be a corporate attorney. Not that I knew what that was, but there was this famous TV show then called LA Law, and it's like beautiful people with lots of money doing interesting things. Again, shallow as hell as far as my perspective. But I'm like, I don't know, I'll do that. And I had an uncle who was doing that. And then, so I set down that path only to discover during winter break my senior year, when I sat down with my uncle and asked him to describe his life, I'm like, I didn't want to do any of those things. And I had no idea what to do. And until 6 weeks before I graduated, 31 years ago, I mean, I had a 1-year fellowship lined up in public policy. Grew up in the DC area, public policy, like, yeah, I'll do that. Not that I knew what I wanted to do, but, you know, being a creature of that space, like public policy. And the 6 weeks before I graduated, this guy pulled me aside and asked me what my plans were. And we had a conversation. He goes, I want you to consider, have you considered getting a PhD in history? I was doing a senior thesis with him, sorry. I'm like, no, I've never considered it. He goes, well, you should. And these are the reasons why, let's have lunch. And quite literally 31 years, we're in November, 31 years and 6 months ago, he had that conversation with me. We were just trading emails last week. I mean, we're still in touch. So he's the one who put the idea in my head. And I had to I had to explain to myself, to my father, about why I would go down this road. Because when he got his PhD in public administration, the job market was horrible. There was just a glut of PhDs. And he never practiced the PhD. He got it for other reasons, but he just knew there wasn't a viable job market. And I had to explain why I thought it would be okay. And then it worked out, but I stumbled into this one, and at somebody else's advice, actually.
Yeah, that's actually great advice for all of us. I know a lot of people who are very worried when they don't know what they want to do. So thank you so much for that.
I've told that story many times to undergraduates for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, President Holloway, could you tell us about a teacher that may have had an influence on you for a good or a bad reason?
Well, I've told you about one just now. I mean, that comes to mind. Elliot Gorn is his name, who was visiting at Stanford my senior year, and now he's taught at several places. Teaches at Loyola University in Chicago. He and I really have had a sustained relationship over these 30 years, you know, it's grown from him being truly a mentor only to becoming a friend. and an advisor the whole way through, basically. And he's a fellow historian, so we can talk shop in those ways too. So when I think of a teacher, he's truly the first person who comes to mind. I mean, after that, I would start thinking about, individual moments more so than a sustained relationship with other individuals, like in my elementary school years. Just teachers that I think made it okay for me to be the nerdy kid that I was. I mean, I don't know how else to put it, but those teachers who, and I've lost touch with them. I have no idea. I'm sure a number of them have passed away. So I can't claim that kind of depth of relationship. But there are those teachers who just were supportive and nurturing. And actually, really, not that you'd have known this in asking the question, the teachers mattered the most to me was my mother, who was a teacher. I just never had her. I was never her student per se, but she had a profound effect upon my life. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Wow.
my mom's a teacher too. It's when you have a mom who's a teacher, you view what they do so much differently and have so much appreciation for all the work they put into their work.
Elementary school teacher?
Yeah, she teaches autism for kids in first grade. So
Wow.
it's
Yeah.
tough, but I have nothing but respect for teachers, especially elementary school teachers, because they do a lot for very little pay.
My mother was K through 1, once in a while second grade, and we don't have time for this, but quite literally on a number of occasions, 3 or 4, people have come up to me out of the blue, not too different from the Leanna Kuntz moment we just had a few moments ago, saying, was Kay Holloway your mother by any chance? I'm like, yeah, like I was her student 30 years ago. And she passed away in cancer. And he goes, the thing that made me sad is that, because I still live in that area, that I wanted my kid to have her as a teacher. And I'm like, I mean, that just like start the waterworks right there. But that someone 30 years after the fact, although I just told you I had a professor from 30 years ago, but a kindergartner from 30 years after the fact, talking about hoping that they wanted to have their child taught by my mother. Yeah. That's pretty special.
Yes, indeed. It sounds it. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I actually, in terms of also like significant figures in our lives, President Holloway, like, what does it mean to you, or like, does it even mean something to you that you are like the first Black president of Rutgers? Because it's something completely unprecedented at our university.
Yeah. The way you phrased it is important. What does it mean, or does it mean something to you? And it kind of depends. I mean, I'm 53 years old, and based on what I have done in my career in terms of administrative positions, and because of our society, I've been the first. This is my 3rd time being a first. Okay. First Black dean of Yale College, first Black provost at Northwestern, first Black president at Rutgers. And sure, I take pride in breaking through a barrier. Of course I do. But during my press conference after I was announced back in January, I was asked a version of this question. And I'm like, look, yeah, of course I take pride, but did it need to take 254 years? I'm confident in myself, but I'm not that special. So like, what is it, right? So there's a way in which, while I take pride in it and I carry with it, it comes with a heck of a sense of responsibility. And those, if you pay attention in the coming years, I don't know when it's going to happen, but it will come with a real burden as well, because of the expectations that I should have done X, Y, or Z as the first Black president, that they expected me to, whoever the they is, expected me to do something differently. So that's what there might be, they're going to think there might be a Black way of doing something. And that's been my experience at Yale and Northwestern, and it's exquisitely painful. And often because the accusations are quite off the mark, but they play well in a crowd, or they play well in a, in a post or something like that. So coming along with the duty and the challenge of being the first Black president is this moment of reckoning is just in the offing somewhere. Don't know where, don't know when it's going to happen, but where, I will be, the race card will be played against me. And that may sound cynical, but it's happened enough that it's tough. It's tough. So that part comes with it. And I want to be very clear, I'm not likening myself in any way to Barack Obama, except for we were both first Black somethings, right? And, if you were younger then, of course, but he got this impossible set of expectations that no matter what, he's going to fail. And so I'm talking about that in a microcosm kind of way. That's part of the burden of being the first. And whether one of you may be the first in something that you end up doing, and that will come to visit upon you. I mean, it's exciting, it's flattering, it's sobering, and it's hard, all at the same time.
Yeah, thank you for what a well thought out answer.
That was wonderful. That's exactly the kind of material we're looking for.
Thank you.
Look, the first time this boomeranged back on me was the hardest part of my professional career. I mean, it was brutal. So I've had a lot of time to think about this. Spent a lot of time thinking about it. Yeah.
Okay. Lindsay, do you want to?
Sure. So you mentioned earlier that your father didn't really talk about your family history with you, and that's part of what inspired you, not just put that quote there when you were doing Jim Crow wisdom and all that. With your kids, do you make a conscious effort to make sure that they know their history? And what do you think the role of memory plays in building a family or a community like Rutgers?
It's a great question. It's really complicated. So one of the things I talk about in my book is, the talk when, Black parents tell their Black children, life is not fair, and all these different things. And I say in the book, I don't know when I'm going to have that conversation. There's a fundamental debate. I'm going to protect my children from the nastiness of the world as long as possible, so they can grow their self-esteem and, da-da-da-da-da. But sooner or later, it's going to happen, right? That moment. Or you say, I'm going to tell it to them early, I'm going to tell it to them hard, and it's going to be a tough love situation. They got to build up their spine. And those are two totally different ways of parenting, both of which I think have their merits, as long as they don't come with, emotional or physical brutality. But, I more or less chose the former, that I wanted my kids just to be kids. Yeah. And then as we have a daughter and a son, as daughter's the oldest, as she grew older, she would find herself in interesting conversations. And those were usually the signals to me to start talking about other things. Now, she was also very attentive. So she would look at my bookshelf. She knew what the kinds of things I was talking about. So she was fully aware of, she was at least somewhat aware of what I'll simply call my racial reality. But it really wasn't until she got to college, and we all know how friendly college can be to identities. And she got to college and could not find her space as a mixed race child, who is, goodness, what isn't she? Black, Native American, Italian, Irish, Puerto Rican. And her best friends, she's adopted a very mixed sort of racial position. And those are her best friends. And not that I could have known it actually by looking at them, but that's her cohort. So we've had conversation growing out of her experiences. Our son looks much more like my wife, and he's fairer skinned than our daughter, and doesn't have curly hair, has very wavy hair. So he could easily pass for being white, easily. And so he has to navigate that space in a whole different kind of way. It's just not part of his daily world. Whereas our daughter has no choice, because people look at her and they can't make out what she is. And I say that in that way quite deliberately. So it's really been based on our kids' experiences that we've guided them through conversations. Our daughter's more curious and inquisitive and also passionate about social justice, racial justice issues. So we've had a lot of conversations. Often at some point me telling her to calm down, which she does not appreciate at all. And
I can only imagine.
yeah. But our son's in a different space. So, it's not been part of our parenting project to talk about these things with our kids. And when I mentioned a short version of this to in a book reading when Jim Crow was going to come out, I mean, a couple of parents really went after me. I'm like, look, I'm not passing judgment on your style. It's just, this is the choice I've made. And isn't it ironic? They would say. I'm like, yeah, life's ironic. That's actually kind of the point of the book, is that these things are all very unpredictable and there's no one way to be X, Y, or Z. And the last thing on this is, part of it is really quite personal in that, I teach the topic, I read in the topic, race in America. I teach the topic, I read in the topic, I think in the topic, and then I moved into administration. I do policy on the topic, especially the way the nature of the world has been in this country for the last 10 years. And when I come home, I don't want to talk about this stuff anymore. Like,
Right, yeah.
I want to say like, well, show me the latest TikToks. I mean, you're going to show them to me anyway. Might as well show them to me now. I was talking to my son last night about history, but not about history, but he's a big computer gamer. And we started talking about the Atari console I got when I was 12 years old, which was like the latest, biggest, hottest thing. And we ended up talking about like classic video games for 30 minutes. And I was explaining, it started because I was pointing out the ingredients on a can. And I'm like, the nutrition label, whatever. Mm-hmm. I said, when I was your age, those weren't on anything. He goes, what do you mean? I'm like, oh no, this nutrition stuff is fairly new. And in fact, the ingredients weren't even on most things. How'd you know what you're eating? I'm like, I don't know, you just ate it. So that started a whole conversation.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that started a whole conversation about, changes over time, and then ends up in computer games. So that was our history conversation last night. That's
awesome. My parents told me all the time whenever I'm like, do you know how much sugar's in this can? They're like, back in my day, we didn't need to know. No one needed to know. One of our last
sugar was there. You didn't know where your kids were. Yeah. You didn't know. I mean, things worked out.
It was just better. One of our next questions, this is a lot easier and hopefully really fun. We just want to know what your favorite autobiography is, because as you know, this is autobiography class. This is our attempt at autobiography. Do you have one that has particularly resonated with you over the years?
That's not easy at all, ironically.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
I'm actually turning to look at my bookshelves and trying to think of like, yikes, there are moments. This isn't quite, it's not an obvious answer, okay? So there are moments in I'm thinking essays, frankly, that are autobiographical, either explicitly or implicitly, that turn my head inside out. In the best way. Any number of essays by James Baldwin in his collections of essays, his notions of racial identity as he experienced, or what it meant to be an American versus a Black American by sitting in a Swiss village or in a Paris cafe, and to think through the fungibility of a racial identity, something that I had always thought was fixed. And reading it through Baldwin's stories, I'm like, oh my God, I understand that conceptually. And then when I left the country for the first time, I really understood it. So that comes to mind right away. The best essay I've ever read is not it's not really autobiographical, but it's a hell of an essay. It's by Ralph Ellison in his collection of essays called Shadow and Act. The essay is called The World in the Jug. And it's him recounting, it's a letter, a faux letter, a letter to this critic in New York intellectual, Irving Howe. And Ellison is taking incredible issue with the way that Howe described what Black authors could write about. And it's this very angry essay about human possibility that is autobiographical in many ways. And that essay I read in my first year in grad school changed my notion of what writing could be like and what criticism could look like. The other thing that comes to mind that is memoiristic is Saidiya Hartman's book, Lose Your Mother. She's an astonishing professor at Columbia of literature and criticism, and wrote this book about her, a Black woman, about traveling to Ghana in search of roots, essentially. And she played with genre in a way that I didn't know was possible. It was actually very informative in terms of Jim Crow wisdom. I finally gave myself permission to write in a different voice. I'm sure I'm going to think of like 10 other books after this conversation, but those are my immediate.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought it'd be so much easier. I apologize. Anytime someone, I mean, we're English majors, so we totally get it. Someone be like, "Oh, you study English. What's your favorite book?" And we're like, let me look at my, let me look at my phone. But those are great. Some of those I'm definitely gonna have to check out because I really have not read them all.
And I am going to have to look around the office to think through. The hard part is the office is not. I got so frustrated, I just threw the books up. I just got so tired. They aren't organized except for like one vertical. So I don't know where my collections of autobiography are, but if I have a brainstorm, I'll write to one of you about it.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Very much.
So real quick, before we do wrap up, is there anything that we haven't asked you that you would have liked to answer? Anything that you feel is particularly pertinent to your story that we have not brought up today?
That too is an interesting question. I mean, I think the questions hit on a lot of basic things. I mean, but how much, and I say this sort of as a reflective piece, how much of an autobiography depends on someone's upbringing? Like how much of it depends, I mean, you asked me about childhood, but like geography, like where they were born, or how much of it depends on their siblings or their family lineage, or, I mean, there's so many different ways. You understand this about how do you get to an autobiography? How do you get to a moment of, in this case, what I'll call confession? I mean, which is what an interview ideally becomes in some way. I will say this is different than what you asked, but it just came to mind when I said confession. The strangest autobiographical moment I had in terms of when someone's asking me a question about my past. There was a student, this is when I was Dean of Yale College, she was an undergrad, and I knew her from other circumstances, and she was doing a show, Twilight LA, I'm blanking on the actress's name, who does interviews and then enacts the person. Quite famous Black woman artist. Anyway, she was interviewing people and then putting on a show at the end of the semester when she would take those people's narratives and weave them into a performance. It's really quite a powerful way if it's done properly. So she was talking to me, sitting in my office. I think she might have thrown me off because I always sat in a rocking chair and other people sat in. She sat in my rocking chair when she walked in. I'm like, oh my God, that's my chair. I don't know what to do. But sat down. I sat down in the guest seat. And then I've been interviewed a lot. And she asked me questions that I'd never been asked before, and asked me about my mother, and asked me about like the favorite dish that she made, the dish that she made that was my favorite. And that was like second or third question like that. And I was so unprepared for that kind of question that I got to a very confessional place, like really quickly, as I started reflecting upon this favorite recipe and telling stories about it. And at one point, quite literally became overwhelmed. And I got choked up and said, we've got to change the topic. I can't, please change the topic. And I'd not ever been that vulnerable with a student before. Totally caught me by surprise. So there's a way in which I asked, when you asked the question, I started asking like, well, how do you get to an autobiographical moment? I mean, she got to a moment I didn't know existed. It's very strange. She ended up putting it in the play actually, which I thought was pretty cool in retrospect. But
I think, of course, now we have to know what that favorite dish was.
Yes.
it was probably my mother's biscuits, which she didn't pass the recipe down to me for years after I left the home, because that was the way that her rationale was, because then you'll come home. And but before she passed away, I have the recipe. It gets trotted out on special occasions.
Good.
It's really good, and makes me think of her every time when we make it. So it's lovely.
Wonderful.
That's wonderful. Yes, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
And our Professor Wallace, he had to teach class right now, but he wanted us to extend his thank you to you for agreeing to meet with us today.
My pleasure.
We cannot express how grateful we are to have had this opportunity. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know I've had a good past 30 minutes. I've had fun. I hope that you did as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Give my best to Maurice as well in return, please.
We shall, of course.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So we just wanted to
Oh,
say.
Yes.
he had a story he wanted us to let you know about. I think he met with a family member of yours a few years ago when he was teaching at, I think, the University of Virginia. And they had lunch together.
My nephew.
And he met a bunch of your family members. And he thought we should let you know. So what we're trying to say is from all different sides, we know exactly who you are. We know all of your family members, all of your past acquaintances.
One quick story on that point, and then I will release you. My nephew, Luke, that's who he's talking about. Luke was working at the Woodson Institute at UVA, which is a Black Studies think tank, basically. And about a year into it, the director said, "How come you didn't tell me your uncle is Jonathan Holloway?" He's like, "Was I supposed to?" And she, I mean, this is like a historian's think tank. And she goes, why did you not bring this up? I'm like, "Luke, you never told her?" He goes, "No, I'm like, okay, whatever." I mean, because we all, these are small worlds. Then he goes off to apply for a PhD program in performance. And Northwestern is a great performance studies thing. Like, let me introduce you to these people. These are my colleagues and they're my friends. No, you can't. Luke, let me introduce you. I can't get you in, but I can like introduce you. No, you can't do it. He ends up going to Stanford for the program in modern thought and literature. And his advisor is like a friend of mine. I'm like, "Luke, you're there, you're admitted. He picked you. I had nothing to do with it. I didn't know you're even applying." "No, you're not allowed." So he has this he finally, after 2.5 years, finally gave me permission to share the connection. And as soon as I shared it, the advisor turned his head and was like, "My God, you look exactly alike." I'm like, "I know," because I should have seen it before, but you know what? Family is complicated. What can I say? Small worlds too.
President Holloway, I have one really super quick question.
Sure.
So on a scale of like super
my God.
unlikely to like super likely, where do you fall in regards to being challenged to a scooter race by an undergraduate student to go through like, I don't know, college ebb or something real quick?
From super unlikely to super likely
Yeah.
to negative super unlikely.
Okay.
Those scooters, when I saw those scooters, I thought, well, that's interesting. And within 2 days, I was referring to them as those damn scooters. So on the principle, I cannot abide by a scooter race.
Okay. All right. I thought I'd just
I
ask.
appreciate the question and the implicit dare or invitation. I don't know which.
We had to ask.
It's like a hazing we do with all of the new presidents.
Yeah.
We make them go on some sort of
It's
vehicle.
a time-honored Rutgers tradition.
Yeah, clearly. Think of other things. Think of other things, and I shall be there for you, but not the damn scooters.
Understandable.
Okay.
All right. Well, this has been a real delight, everybody. I've got to do my next thing, and I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah.
Good luck with everything, with your final project.
Thank you so much.
Stay safe and healthy, please.
Thank you as well.
We really appreciate your time, sir.
Oh, it's a
We
pleasure.
really do.
It's a real
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Take care.
Have a nice day.
Have a
Thanks,
great
you too.
one.
You're
Bye.
welcome.